The sky over New Washington burned red as another orbital defense platform exploded. Commander William Carter watched from the window of the United Nations Emergency Council chamber, his weathered face reflecting the distant flames. 8 years of war against the Draken Collective had brought humanity to the edge of extinction. Today might be the day they finally fell over that edge. "Commander Carter, the Council is waiting," a young aide said softly. William nodded and turned away from the window. He straightened his uniform, feeling the weight of responsibility on his shoulders. The blue and gold insignia of the Earth Defense Force seemed to mock him now. What defense could they offer when their best weapons were being swatted aside like insects? The council chamber fell silent as William entered. 12 grim faces stared back at him. These were the last leaders of Earth's united government, what remained of it anyway. "The situation has worsened," William began without preamble. "We lost the Jupiter defense line yesterday. The Saturn outpost went dark 3 hours ago." He paused to let the information sink in. "The Draken fleet will reach Earth in less than 3 months. Admiral Susan Bennett, head of what remained of the space fleet, slammed her fist on the table. "We need to evacuate more civilians to the underground shelters. The orbital platforms won't hold." "Most shelters are already at capacity," replied Council President Frank Miller. His once black hair had turned completely gray during the war. "And the Draken have found the last 3 evacuation ships we sent out." William activated the holographic display at the center of the table. A 3-dimensional map of the solar system appeared, with red markers showing the advancing Draken forces. Blue markers indicated human defenses. There were far too few blue markers left. "They've adapted to all our weapons," William continued. "Their bio-armor absorbs energy weapons. Their ships can repair damage in minutes. And their soldiers." He paused, remembering the horror of seeing human Marines torn apart by the 8-limbed Draken fighters. "Their soldiers don't die easily." "Tell us something we don't know, Commander," snapped Council Member Diane Webb. "We need solutions, not a recap of our failures." William looked at her coldly. "I'm being realistic, Council Member. We've lost colonies on Mars, Europa, and Titan. The moon bases went dark last month, over 3 billion dead." His voice cracked slightly. "I want to give you hope, but I won't lie to you." A heavy silence fell over the room. In the distance, air raid sirens began to wail. Another Draken scout ship had been detected entering the atmosphere. "We should surrender," said Council Member Gregory Patel. "Maybe they'll spare those of us who remain." "They don't accept surrender," Admiral Bennett replied. "You know what they did to the Europa colony when they tried to surrender." She didn't need to elaborate. Everyone remembered the broadcasts before they were cut off. William was about to speak when the chamber doors opened. A thin man with thick glasses entered, clutching a tablet to his chest like a shield. Dr. Alan Peterson, lead scientist for the Neural Weapons Division. William had worked with him on several failed projects early in the war. He hadn't seen Peterson in almost 2 years. "I apologize for the interruption," Peterson said, his voice barely above a whisper, "but I believe we have a solution." William raised an eyebrow. "A weapon that can penetrate their bio-armor?" Peterson shook his head. "Not exactly. Please secure the room." President Miller looked skeptical but nodded to the guards. They activated the security protocols. Metal shutters slid over the windows. Signal jammers hummed to life. "What is this about, Dr. Peterson?" Miller asked. Peterson connected his tablet to the holographic display. The solar system map disappeared, replaced by an image of a massive underground facility. "Project Fenrir is ready for deployment." William frowned. Project Fenrir was shut down. The neural modifications were too dangerous. "We never shut it down," Peterson admitted. "We continued in secret, with funding from—" He glanced at several council members who suddenly looked uncomfortable. "What exactly is Project Fenrir?" asked Admiral Bennett. Peterson adjusted his glasses. "After our first encounters with the Draken, we realized our technology could not match theirs. But there was one area where humans had an advantage. Our minds." He swiped across his tablet, and the display changed to show medical scans of a human brain. The Draken are a hive mind, efficient but predictable. Humans are chaotic, creative, unpredictable. We decided to weaponize that unpredictability. How? William demanded. We found volunteers, soldiers who had lost everything to the Draken. We modified their neural pathways, enhanced their bodies, and connected them to a shared neural network. Peterson swiped again, and the image changed to rows of tanks, each containing a floating human figure. You made your own hive mind? President Miller asked, looking disturbed. No, Peterson replied. Something far more powerful. These soldiers can tap into humanity's collective subconscious. Every survival instinct, every fighting technique, every burst of creativity in human history, they can access it all. They remain individuals, but they can think and fight as one when needed. How many? William asked. 100, Peterson answered. All volunteers, all aware of what they were becoming. Admiral Bennett looked skeptical. 100 soldiers. Against the Draken fleet, that's suicide. Normal soldiers, yes, Peterson agreed. But these aren't normal soldiers anymore. They're something new, something the Draken cannot predict or understand. He swiped one more time and video footage appeared. It showed a training exercise. A man and woman in simple black uniforms faced off against what looked like 30 combat robots. What happened next made William's blood run cold. The two soldiers moved with impossible speed. They didn't just fight, they flowed like water around attacks. They communicated without speaking. When one attacked, the other was already moving to defend their partner's exposed side. Within minutes, all 30 robots lay destroyed. That was early in their training, Peterson said. They're much more efficient now. What are the side effects? William asked quietly. Peterson hesitated. They're changing. Their minds are evolving. The neural network is reshaping them. They're still human, but... He trailed off. But what? Pressed President Miller. But they may not be able to return to normal society when this is over, Peterson admitted. The neural changes are permanent. If they succeed, there might not be a society to return to anyway, Admiral Bennett pointed out. Councilmember Webb leaned forward. Have they agreed to this deployment? They've been asking for it, Peterson said. They know what's at stake. They've been watching our defeats, feeling the deaths of billions. William stared at the image of the soldiers floating in their tanks. 100 volunteers who had given up their humanity to save humanity itself. It was a terrible price. When can they be ready? William asked finally. They're ready now, Peterson replied. They've been ready for months, waiting for this moment. Outside, the air raid sirens continued to wail. Another explosion lit up the sky. Time was running out. Deploy them, President Miller ordered, his voice heavy with the weight of the decision. God help us all. The elevator descended deep beneath the Rocky Mountains. Commander William Carter felt his ears pop as they passed the 2-mile mark. Beside him, Admiral Susan Bennett checked her watch for the 3rd time. Dr. Peterson stood silently, eyes fixed on the floor display as the numbers kept dropping. How far down does this facility go? Susan asked, breaking the uncomfortable silence. 5 miles, Peterson replied. We needed to be beyond the reach of Draken scanners and away from civilian populations. William raised an eyebrow. Why away from civilians? Peterson didn't answer immediately. When he did, his voice was soft. Safety precautions. The elevator finally stopped. The doors opened to reveal a long white corridor with armed guards at regular intervals. Unlike the standard Earth Defense Force uniforms, these guards wore black armor with no insignia. Their faces showed no emotion as the 3 visitors passed. These soldiers aren't part of any military branch I know, Susan whispered to William. Project Fenrir has its own security, Peterson explained, somehow hearing her despite the low volume. Regular military personnel aren't cleared to interact with the subjects. You mean the volunteers, William corrected. Peterson nodded absently. Yes, the volunteers. They reached a massive door at the end of the corridor. Peterson placed his hand on a scanner, then leaned forward for a retinal scan. Finally, he spoke clearly. Dr. Alan Peterson, Project Director. Authorization Omega 739. The door hissed as pressure equalized, then slowly swung open. The room beyond was vast, far larger than William had expected could exist this far underground. Row after row of cylindrical tanks filled the space, each illuminated from within by soft blue light. In each tank floated a human figure connected to a web of tubes and wires. "Welcome to Project Fenrir," Peterson said, leading them inside. William approached the nearest tank. A man floated inside, eyes closed, appearing peaceful. A small screen displayed vital signs and brainwave patterns that pulsed in complex rhythms. The nameplate read, "Kevin Richards, former paramedic, Mars colony survivor." "They're all volunteers?" William asked, looking at the still figures. "Every one," Peterson confirmed. "Most lost families in the early Draken attacks. Some were rescued from colonies before they fell. All were willing to undergo the modifications." Susan moved between the tanks, reading names. Olivia Martinez, former Olympic athlete. Gabriel Kim, chess grandmaster. Grace Simmons, Marine sniper. She turned to Peterson. "You didn't just choose soldiers. We needed diversity of thought," Peterson explained. "Different skills, different perspectives. The neural network synthesizes these differences into new approaches. A soldier might know how to fight, but a chess player knows strategy. An athlete understands how to push physical limits." William stopped at a tank containing a woman who appeared to be in her 30s. "Lisa Ortiz, theoretical physicist." He read aloud. "One of our most promising subjects," Peterson said. "Her scientific understanding, combined with the combat instincts of others in the network, has led to tactical innovations we never considered." A technician approached Peterson and whispered something in his ear. Peterson nodded. "It's time," he said to William and Susan. "We're going to wake one of them so you can understand what we're dealing with." They followed Peterson to a separate chamber off the main room. Inside was a single tank. The figure inside was a woman with short brown hair. The nameplate identified her as Grace Simmons, the Marine sniper Susan had noted earlier. "Why her?" William asked. "Grace adapted to the neural modifications faster than most," Peterson explained as technicians prepared various equipment. "She retained strong verbal skills even when fully connected to the network. Some of the others," he hesitated, "some communicate differently now." The technicians drained the fluid from Grace's tank. As the liquid level dropped, her body was lowered, gently onto a padded table. The tank opened with a hydraulic hiss. Grace remained unconscious, breathing steadily on her own. "Disconnecting neural suppressors," a technician announced. The effect was immediate and disturbing. Grace's body arched as if electrocuted. Her eyes snapped open, completely black with no visible iris or white. A low growl emerged from her throat, primitive and threatening. William instinctively reached for his sidearm, but Peterson held up a hand to stop him. "Give her a moment," Peterson said calmly. "The transition is always difficult." Grace's body relaxed gradually. She blinked several times, and her eyes began to appear more normal, though her pupils remained unnaturally dilated. She sat up without assistance and looked directly at William. "Commander Carter," she said, her voice rough from disuse. "Admiral Bennett, you've finally come to see us." William stepped forward. "How do you know who we are?" "I know many things," Grace replied. "The network knows. We've been watching the war, feeling it." She tilted her head slightly. "The Jupiter line has fallen. Saturn, too. Earth has 3 months before the main Draken fleet arrives." "That information is classified," Susan said sharply. Grace smiled slightly. "Nothing is hidden from the network. We feel the deaths of our people. Every colony that falls, every ship destroyed. We feel them all." William studied her carefully. "Dr. Peterson says you're still human." "We are," Grace confirmed. "But more and less." She looked at her hands as if seeing them for the first time. "We've sacrificed certain things to gain others." "What have you gained?" William asked. Instead of answering, Grace suddenly moved. One moment she was sitting on the table, the next she stood behind William, holding the sidearm he hadn't even felt her remove from his holster. Speed, she said, placing the weapon on a nearby counter. Strength. Perception beyond normal human limits. William tried to hide his shock. And what have you lost? Grace was silent for a moment. Privacy of thought. Individuality to some degree. The ability to ignore the suffering of others. She looked at Peterson. Show them the others. Show them what we can do together. Peterson nodded and led them back to the main chamber. Several tanks were now empty, their occupants gathered in a clear area at the center of the room. About 20 men and women in simple gray clothing stood in a loose circle, not speaking but clearly communicating somehow. One man separated from the group and approached. The nameplate on his empty tank had identified him as Kevin Richards, the paramedic. They want to know when we'll be deployed, Kevin said without introduction. His eyes had the same unnaturally dilated appearance as Grace's. Soon, Peterson replied. We're just explaining your capabilities to the commander and admiral. Kevin nodded once. We should demonstrate. He turned to the others and made a small gesture with his hand. What followed was unlike anything William had ever seen in his years of military service. The group of 20 began a combat exercise without any verbal commands. They moved as if choreographed, yet with a fluidity that suggested instantaneous adaptation rather than rehearsal. When two of them engaged in hand-to-hand combat, their movements were too fast to follow clearly. When they formed teams, their coordination was perfect. Most disturbing was their absolute silence throughout. No commands, no communication, yet perfect synchronization. How are they doing this? Susan whispered. The neural network, Peterson explained. They share perceptions, knowledge, instincts. When one sees something, they all see it. When one learns something, they all learn it. William watched as Lisa Ortiz, the physicist, joined the exercise. Despite her academic background, she fought with the same skill as the former soldiers. How soon can all 100 be ready for deployment? William asked, making his decision. The remaining 80 can be awakened within a week, Peterson replied. But once awakened, they'll need to stay active. The suppressors are becoming less effective as they evolve. Evolve? Susan asked sharply. What do you mean, evolve? Peterson looked uncomfortable. The neural network is self-optimizing. It's making them more efficient, more connected, less human, William finished for him. More effective, Peterson corrected. And right now, effectiveness is what we need. William watched the silent, coordinated movements of the enhanced humans. These were no longer regular soldiers. They were something new, something created out of desperation, a weapon that might save humanity, but at what cost? Begin awakening the others, William ordered. We deploy them to Mars first. If they can reclaim the Olympus Mons colony, we'll know they're ready for the main Draken fleet. As they left the chamber, William cast one last look at the strange fighters. They had stopped their exercise and were watching him leave. All 20 pairs of eyes, focused, unblinking, waiting for the chance to fulfill their purpose. Humanity's deadliest warriors were about to be unleashed. The transport ship shuddered as it entered the thin Martian atmosphere. Inside, 100 Fenrir soldiers sat in perfect stillness. Unlike regular troops, they didn't fidget or check equipment nervously before battle. They simply waited. Black, eyes staring ahead at nothing, minds connected through their shared neural network. Kevin Richards sat near the front, closest to the ship's cockpit. Though his body remained still, his mind raced through the tactical data flowing through the network. The Draken had established their primary base in the ruins of the Olympus Mons colony. Satellite imagery showed approximately 500 Draken soldiers and 3 of their biomechanical ships anchored to the surface. 5 minutes to drop, the pilot announced over the intercom, his voice tense. This was the first human ship to approach Mars in over a year. Grace Simmons, seated across from Kevin, blinked once. Through the network, Kevin felt her silent question. Ready? Kevin gave the slightest nod. They were all ready. They had trained for this moment for years, even while suspended in their tanks. Lisa Ortiz, the physicist, had developed their battle plan. Unlike traditional military strategy, it didn't rely on formations or coordinated fire. The Fenrir soldiers would fight as a single organism with 100 bodies, reacting instantly to changing conditions through their shared perception. 2 minutes, the pilot called. No sign they've spotted us yet. Stealth systems holding. Grace stood up. The other Fenrir soldiers followed in perfect unison, moving to the drop doors at each side of the transport. They wore lightweight armor, far less protection than standard troops would need. Their enhanced bodies and reaction times made bulky protection unnecessary. "Remember the mission?" Commander William Carter's voice came through the ship's speakers. He was monitoring from orbit. "Confirm Draken vulnerabilities and test their defenses. Do not engage the main force yet. This is reconnaissance only." Kevin knew the commander didn't understand. The Fenrir soldiers weren't going to just scout. They were going to hunt. The ship slowed, hovering just above the Martian surface about 5 miles from the Draken base. Close enough to reach quickly, far enough to avoid immediate detection. "Drop in 30 seconds, the pilot announced. "Good luck down there." The Fenrir soldiers didn't respond. Luck had nothing to do with what they were about to do. The doors slid open. Red Martian dust swirled into the cabin. Without hesitation, the soldiers leaped out into the dim light of the distant sun. They landed with practiced ease despite the 30-foot drop, their enhanced bodies absorbing the impact. Then they began to run. On Earth, even the best human athletes couldn't maintain a sprint for more than a minute. The Fenrir soldiers ran at 40 miles per hour across the Martian landscape, their enhanced muscles and lungs working far beyond normal human limits. They moved in perfect formation, like a pack of wolves. Kevin felt the network buzzing with shared information. Grace Running Point spotted a Draken scout ship before any of the others could see it. Instantly, they all knew its location. Lisa calculated its patrol pattern in seconds. They adjusted their route without slowing, avoiding detection. They reached the outskirts of what had once been humanity's largest Mars colony in just over 7 minutes. Now the massive dome that had protected the settlement was shattered, the buildings inside crumbling or repurposed by the aliens. The Fenrir soldiers split into 5 groups of 20 without a word or signal. Kevin's group circled to the north side of the colony, where the dome's damage was most severe. Grace led her team to the east. Lisa took the west. 2 other teams positioned themselves to the south. Kevin crouched behind a broken wall, examining the closest Draken patrol. The Yao aliens moved on 8 limbs, their bodies covered in a shifting living armor that adapted to threats. Previous human weapons had proven nearly useless against it. Through the network, Kevin received Lisa's analysis. The living armor had patterns, slight variations in thickness and coverage. She had identified vulnerable points, areas where the armor was thinnest. "Attack pattern Delta," came the shared thought from Grace. Kevin didn't need further explanation. The entire attack strategy downloaded into his mind through the network. His team would create a distraction. Grace's team would hit the most vulnerable targets. Lisa's team would capture one of the biomechanical ships. The South teams would prevent reinforcements from arriving. Kevin grabbed a small device from his belt, a sonic disruptor designed by Lisa based on her analysis of Draken communication patterns. He activated it and threw it over the wall toward the patrol. The device emitted a high-pitched wail that affected the Draken nervous system. The aliens immediately convulsed, their limbs twitching uncontrollably. Before they could recover, Kevin's team was on them. The Fenrir soldiers moved with inhuman speed and precision. Regular human troops had always struggled against the Draken, finding their multiple limbs and quick movements difficult to counter. But the enhanced soldiers processed information faster than normal humans. They saw the patterns in the Draken. Movements anticipated their attacks. Kevin grabbed a Draken soldier by 2 of its upper limbs, using its own momentum to slam it into the ground. Its living armor tried to adapt, thickening where Kevin held it. But Kevin was already shifting his grip to the newly vulnerable areas. He drove his fist through the weakened section of armor and into the creature's central nervous cluster. Around him, his team was equally effective. Within 90 seconds, the entire Draken patrol lay dead without a single shot fired. Through the network, Kevin sensed similar success from the other teams. Grace's group had eliminated 3 patrols. Lisa's team had reached one of the biomechanical ships and was working to secure it. Then something changed in the network. A spike of pain. One of the soldiers in the southern team had been injured. The Drake in there had responded faster than expected, deploying some kind of acid weapon. Kevin felt the injured soldier's pain as if it were his own. They all did, but instead of distracting them, it sharpened their focus. The network absorbed the information about the new weapon, analyzed it, and distributed countermeasures. Converge on the south point, came the shared directive. Kevin's team moved immediately, abandoning their position to reinforce the southern approach. As they ran through the ruined streets of the once human colony, they passed the remains of the original settlers. Skeletal figures still sat at workstations or lay in the streets where they had fallen. A surge of shared emotion rippled through the network. Not just anger, but a deep, primal rage. These were their people. This was what the Draken had done to humanity. As Kevin's team reached the southern edge of the colony, they saw the larger Draken force emerging from the central structure, what had once been the colony's main habitat dome. There were at least 100 aliens armed with the acid weapons that had injured their fellow soldier. A normal human force would retreat in the face of such numbers. The Fenrir soldiers advanced. They moved with perfect coordination, using the ruined buildings for cover, drawing the Draken into choke points where their numbers worked against them. The aliens fought with the coordinated efficiency of their hive mind, but the Fenrir network adapted faster, learning from each encounter, the battle intensified. Kevin felt himself slipping deeper into the network consciousness. His individual thoughts faded as the collective mind of the Fenrir soldiers took control. They weren't 100 soldiers anymore. They were a single entity, with 100 bodies, fighting with a savagery and intelligence no enemy could match. By the time the Martian sun set, the Draken base at Olympus Mons had fallen. The first human foothold on Mars had been reclaimed, and in orbit above them, Commander William Carter watched the live feed with a mixture of hope and horror at what humanity had created to ensure its survival. News of the victory on Mars spread quickly through what remained of human civilization. After years of constant retreat and defeat, humanity had finally taken back territory from the Draken. In underground shelters and crowded refugee ships, people gathered around screens to watch the limited footage released by the Earth Defense Force. The videos showed the aftermath rather than the battle itself. The Fenrir soldiers standing amid the ruins of the Olympus Mons colony, Draken bodies scattered around them. The soldiers looked strange to the civilians watching. They stood too still. Their eyes were too dark, but they were human soldiers who had defeated the seemingly unstoppable enemy. In the command center orbiting Earth, Commander William Carter watched a different set of videos, the uncensored footage of the actual battle. He had viewed it 17 times now, and it still disturbed him. "They're changing even faster than Peterson predicted," Admiral Susan Bennett said, entering the room. She looked tired. None of them had slept much since the Mars mission. William nodded. "Did you see the way they moved in the final phase of the battle? No human should be able to move like that." On the screen, the footage showed Kevin Richards tearing through 3 Draken warriors with his bare hands, his movements too fast for the camera to capture clearly. Other Fenrir soldiers displayed similar abilities: impossible speed, strength that shouldn't exist in human muscles, coordination that suggested they were truly operating as a single entity. Peterson says the neural network is optimizing itself for combat, Susan said. Each battle teaches them, makes them more efficient, more dangerous, William corrected. He paused the video on an image of Grace Simmons. In the early footage from Mars, she had still moved somewhat like a human soldier. By the end of the battle, she was something else, crouched low to the ground, moving on all fours at times, tearing at enemies with hands that seemed more like claws. "They got the job done," Susan pointed out. "We've confirmed they captured 2 Draken ships intact. Lisa Ortiz and her team are already learning how to operate them. William switched to another screen showing the current positions of the Draken fleet. The main force was still coming, 3 massive motherships surrounded by hundreds of smaller vessels. They had slowed their approach after losing contact with Mars, but they were still coming. The Fenrir soldiers want to take the fight to the Draken homeworld, William said quietly. Peterson told me this morning. They've been discussing it through their network. Susan looked shocked. That's not possible. We don't even know where it is. They say they can find it. Something about tracing the Draken hive mind signal back to its source. Before Susan could respond, an alert sounded. A communication was coming in from Mars. William activated the screen and Lisa Ortiz's face appeared. Her eyes were now completely black, no whites visible at all. When she spoke, her voice had an odd resonance, as if multiple people were speaking just slightly out of sync. Commander Carter, we have extracted the navigation data from the Draken ships, she said without greeting. We can track their fleet, movements more accurately now. William leaned forward. That's good news, Lisa. What have you found? The 3 motherships will reach Earth orbit in 42 days, sooner than your previous estimates. Her face showed no emotion as she delivered this news. We have also learned how the Draken bioships function. They are partially organic. They can be persuaded. William and Susan exchanged a glance at her strange choice of words. Persuaded how? Susan asked. Their control systems are tied to Draken nervous systems. We have found ways to interface with them using our neural network. Lisa's head tilted, slightly an unnervingly inhuman gesture. We can fly their ships now. William felt a chill. You're connected to Draken technology. Is that safe? Safe is irrelevant, Lisa replied. Effective is what matters. We will bring the captured ships to Earth. We need more. More ships? Susan asked. More soldiers, Lisa clarified. More like us. The 100 are not enough to defeat the main fleet. William shook his head. There are no more. Project Fenrir was experimental. We don't have time to create more enhanced soldiers before the Draken arrive. Lisa was silent for a moment, her black eyes unblinking. Then we will adapt further. Kevin is working on modifications to our neural implants. Grace is developing new combat techniques. We will be ready. The screen went dark as she ended the transmission. They're taking control of their own mission now, Susan said quietly. Does that worry you? William didn't answer directly. Have Peterson meet us in Lab 7. I want to know exactly how far these changes might go. 3 hours later, William and Susan stood in Peterson's lab, watching a simulation based on the latest data from the Fenrir soldiers on Mars. The neural network is evolving at an exponential rate, Peterson explained, pointing to a series of brain scans. Their brains are physically restructuring to optimize the connection. Is this reversible? William asked. Peterson looked away. No. Even if we could somehow disconnect them from the network, their brains have been permanently altered. They can never go back to being regular humans. Susan studied the latest footage from Mars, showing the Fenrir soldiers working on the captured Draken ships. They barely spoke to each other anymore, communicating almost entirely through their neural link. Will they remain loyal? She asked bluntly. Peterson hesitated. They want humanity to survive. That drive is hardwired into the network, but their definition of survival might not match ours anymore. A technician interrupted with an urgent message. The Fenrir soldiers had launched from Mars. They were bringing the captured Draken ships to Earth, but they were taking a detour first, to the Draken forward base on Europa. They didn't ask permission, William noted. I don't think they feel they need it anymore, Peterson replied. For the next 2 weeks, Human Command received only sporadic updates from the Fenrir forces. Brief, technical reports came from Lisa. Short mission summaries from Kevin. Nothing at all from Grace or most of the others. Then they attacked the Draken base on Europa without warning or coordination with Earth's forces. Satellite imagery showed brief, intense fighting before the Draken communications went silent. 26 hours later, the Fenrir soldiers returned to Earth orbit in 5 Draken ships, 3 more than they had started with. They requested permission. to land at the main Earth Defense Force base in what had once been Colorado. William met them at the landing site, a heavily guarded area miles from the nearest civilian population. The ships were disturbing up close, partly mechanical, partly organic, with surfaces that seemed to pulse subtly. The ramp of the lead ship lowered and Kevin Richards walked out. William almost didn't recognize him. Kevin moved differently now, fluid and predatory. The black of his eyes had spread to the surrounding skin, creating dark patches that stretched toward his temples. His hands had changed too, the fingers longer, the nails thicker. Behind Kevin came the other Fenrir soldiers. All showed similar changes, physical adaptations that made them look less human. Grace's teeth were visibly sharper when she spoke. Lisa's skin had taken on a metallic sheen. "We have brought gifts," Kevin said, gesturing to the ships, "and knowledge. We know how to hurt them now." William kept his expression neutral despite his shock at their appearance. "You disobeyed direct orders by attacking Europa. We saw an opportunity," Grace said, her voice raspier than before. "The network calculated a 97% chance of success. And if you had failed? If we had lost all of you?" William demanded. "We would not fail," Lisa stated simply. "The network does not miscalculate." William studied these strange beings that had once been regular humans. They had volunteered to become weapons, and now that transformation was more complete than anyone had anticipated. "The main Draken fleet will reach Earth in 18 days, Kevin said. "We are ready to meet them, are you?" The sky above Earth turned dark as the Draken motherships entered orbit. 3 massive vessels, each the size of a small city, blocked the sun in many places below. Smaller ships swarmed around them like angry insects, preparing for the final assault on humanity's home world. In the main command center beneath the Rocky Mountains, Commander William Carter watched the tactical displays with grim determination. Every remaining human defense system was active: orbital platforms, ground-based, energy weapons, the last squadrons of fighter ships. It would not be enough, and everyone in the room knew it. "The Fenrir soldiers are in position," Admiral Susan Bennett reported, joining William at the central table. "All 5 captured Draken ships plus our last 3 heavy cruisers." William nodded. 8 ships against hundreds. 100 enhanced soldiers and a few thousand regular troops against an alien army that had already killed billions. The odds were terrible. "Any word from Kevin or the others?" he asked. Susan shook her head. "They've gone silent. Peterson says they're deeply connected to the network now, preparing for battle." On the screens above, the first wave of Draken attack ships entered the atmosphere. Earth's defenses fired immediately. Some Draken ships exploded, but many more continued their descent. "It's begun," William said quietly. Far above, in the captured Draken flagship, Kevin Richards sat in what had once been the alien commander's position. His body had changed even more in the past 2 weeks. His skin had darkened to a deep gray in places. The bones of his face had shifted subtly, becoming more angular, but his mind had changed far more. Through the neural network, he felt the presence of the other Fenrir soldiers, not just those on his ship, but those spread across all 8 vessels in their small fleet. Grace commanded one of the human cruisers. Lisa led the assault team in another captured Draken ship. The rest were positioned according to the plan they had developed through their collective consciousness. The plan was unlike any human battle strategy. It relied on impossible timing, on each ship and soldier knowing exactly what the others would do without communication. It required them to think as one mind with many bodies. Kevin felt a presence beside him and turned to see Dr. Peterson. The scientist had insisted on joining the flagship, saying he needed to monitor the Fenrir soldiers during battle. In truth, Kevin knew, Peterson wanted to witness what his creation had become. "They're attacking Earth directly," Peterson said, looking at the displays showing Draken ships entering the atmosphere. "Just as you predicted." Kevin nodded. "They think we will defend the surface. They don't understand what we've become." "And what have you become?" Peterson asked softly. Kevin turned his black eyes to his creator. "The next step. Humanity's answer to extinction." He turned back to the controls, his elongated fingers dancing across the alien interface. The ship moved forward, heading not toward Earth but directly toward the largest Draken mothership. Through the network, Kevin gave the command, "Begin." All 8 ships in the human fleet accelerated at exactly the same moment, each on a different trajectory. To an outside observer, their movements would have appeared random, even suicidal. But through the network, the Fenrir soldiers saw the pattern, the precise gaps in the Draken defenses, visible for fractions of seconds as their ships moved, in predictable patterns. The Draken noticed the approaching ships too late. By the time they began to react, the human fleet had already penetrated their formation. Grace's cruiser fired directly into the engine section of the smallest mothership, hitting a vulnerability Lisa had identified from studying the captured ships. The explosion was massive, tearing a hole in the side of the mothership. Draken ships scrambled to respond, but they were confused by the strange attack pattern. Their hive mind worked well against conventional tactics, but the Fenrir network was faster, more adaptable. Kevin's ship slipped past dozens of Draken defenders taking hits, but the living hull regenerated almost as quickly as it was damaged. Through the network, he felt 3 of the Fenrir soldiers die when their section of the ship was breached. Their knowledge and experience flowed into the network before their deaths, making the rest stronger. "We're going to ram them," Peterson realized, watching their course toward the central mothership. "Not exactly," Kevin replied. As they approached, the massive alien vessel, Lisa's ship, attacked from the opposite side, creating a diversion. The mothership's defenses turned to face this new threat, leaving a temporary blind spot on the side facing Kevin's ship. Inside the ship, 50 Fenrir soldiers prepared for deployment. They gathered in the launch bay, their bodies now so changed that they barely needed spacesuits to survive the vacuum of space. Their skin had toughened, their lungs adapted to hold oxygen longer, their blood chemistry altered to resist cold. "Now," Kevin said, both aloud and through the network. The bay doors opened and the Fenrir soldiers launched themselves into space, using small propulsion units to guide themselves toward the mothership. They looked like dark missiles against the blackness of space, heading directly for the temporary gap in the Draken defenses. On Earth, William and Susan watched in disbelief as the tactic unfolded on their screens. "What are they doing?" Susan asked. "They'll be killed the moment they reach the hull." William didn't answer. He had stopped trying to predict what the Fenrir soldiers were capable of. The enhanced humans reached the mothership and attached themselves to its hull. Through the neural network, Kevin felt their progress as they burned their way inside using tools adapted from Draken technology. They met resistance immediately, alien warriors rushing to defend their ship. The battle inside the mothership was brutal and swift. Back on his ship, Kevin guided them through the alien vessel, using the network to coordinate their movements. 23 more Fenrir soldiers died in the fighting, but the rest pushed forward, heading for the central chamber where the Draken hive mind node was located. Lisa's voice came through the network. "Second mothership breached. Moving to central. Control." Grace reported next. "Engine systems on third target compromised. Beginning shutdown sequence." The Draken fleet fell into disarray as their command structure was attacked from within. Ships collided with each other as contradictory orders spread through their hive mind. The defensive formation around Earth began to break apart. Inside the main mothership, the remaining Fenrir soldiers reached the central chamber. They faced the physical manifestation of the Draken hive mind, a massive, pulsing organic structure connected to thousands of neural interfaces. Through the network, Kevin guided them in placing the devices Lisa had designed, disruptors that would not just destroy this node, but send a cascading failure through the entire Draken hive mind. As the devices activated, Kevin felt a tremendous surge through the neural network. The Draken hive mind, in its death throes, lashed out with psychic energy. Many of the remaining Fenrir soldiers collapsed, their enhanced brains overwhelmed by the alien consciousness. In orbit above Earth, the 3 Draken motherships suddenly went dark. The smaller ships stopped in place or began moving in random directions. The coordinated attack on Earth faltered and then collapsed entirely. 7 days later, William Carter stood at the window of the recovery ward, watching the surviving Fenrir soldiers. Only 38 had returned from the battle. The rest had sacrificed themselves to ensure victory. Will they recover? He asked Dr. Peterson, who stood beside him. Their bodies will heal, Peterson replied. But their minds? He trailed off, watching as Kevin Richards stared silently at the wall, occasionally making small movements with his hands as if still connected to the network. Can they rejoin society? William asked, though he suspected he knew the answer. Peterson shook his head. The changes are too extensive. They experience the world differently now. Normal human interaction would be overwhelming for them. In Iker, the ward Grace Simmons approached Kevin and sat beside him. No words were exchanged, but a kind of understanding seemed to pass between them. Elsewhere in the room, Lisa Ortiz worked at a terminal, her fingers moving too fast for normal human coordination. What will happen to them? William asked. We're establishing a sanctuary, Peterson said. Somewhere remote where they can live in peace. They've earned that much. William nodded. The Draken threat was over. Humanity would survive and rebuild. But the price had been high, especially for those who had volunteered to become something other than human to save their species. Outside the window, the sun was setting. For the first time in years, people around the world would watch that sunset, without fear of alien ships appearing in the sky. Children would sleep peacefully, not in emergency shelters. The long nightmare was over, and in the quiet recovery ward, the remaining Fenrir soldiers, humanity's deadliest warriors, began the difficult process of finding their place in the peace they had sacrificed everything to create.